In this session, we will look at stanzas 5 to 12 of the poem Christabel by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. As in the first part, that is stanzas 1 to 4, I will not read through the text of the poem. You can look at it later on, and we will come directly to the explanation, which goes like this. It took 5 stanzas, but the action is finally starting to heat up. It is a classic horror movie scene. Christabel is just sitting there in the cold and quiet, minding her own business, when suddenly someone starts moaning from the other side of the tree. She does not know where the sound is coming from, but she knows it is very nearby. We are reminded of the weather yet again, but this time it is so we realize that there won't be any animals stirring in the cold. The sound couldn't have been the wind either, since there isn't any. In fact, the wind is so light that Christabel's perfectly coiffed hair, coiffed means done up hair, is still curly and hanging just right. To say that Coleridge was a fan of nature is a bit of an understatement. We can see his fascination with nature in stanzas like this one, where he has the speaker focus on a single element of nature for several lines, even if it has little to do with the story that is being told. We do have to give the leaf some credit for being so tenacious, though we know from the first stanza that it is the very beginning of spring, so that one little red leaf has been hanging on to that branch all winter. Christabel is clearly spooked in this stanza. She is frightened, in other words. Her heart is beating so loudly that the speaker has to tell it to quiet down. No, line 54 is not a typo. Typo means typing mistake. Jesu is the evocative form of Jesus, and it comes from the Latin biblical texts that were common in the Church of England. Though the S was added to the spelling of Jesus' name sometime in the 16th century, poets like Coleridge liked to use the old spelling, likely because it sounded more poetic and maybe just a bit more authentic to their ears. Maria is also the Latin spelling of Mary. Like Jesu, Coleridge likely felt that Maria sounded more poetic than Mary. This is Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus Christ. Christabel decides to look on the other side of the big oak tree to see if that is where the moaning might be coming from. This may or may not be her first mistake. It might be interesting to note that the last 4 lines of the 5th stanza have the same rhyme structure as a limerick. A limerick is a humorous 5-line poem with a rhyme scheme AABBA, which is a form usually reserved for silly or dirty stories that are easy to recite and even easier to remember. On the other side of the tree is a lady dressed in a white robe. No, that's not a typo in line 59 either. Dressed is just the way dressed was spelled at the time. Though the robe is so bright that it looks like it was shining in the moonlight, the damsel's skin is so pale. Damsel means a young lady who is in distress, that it makes the white robe look like a dull and sickly color in comparison. Clearly, this woman is inappropriately dressed, both for the weather and for the time period, since her arms and neck are revealed. Though low necklines were common at the time, bare arms were not. Of course, Considering how chilly means cold the weather is, and Coleridge certainly does not let us forget just how chilly it is, does he? She really should be a little more bundled up. Bundled up means covered up properly, wearing thick, warm woolen clothes. The blue veins in her feet are another indication of just how pale skinned this woman was. This detail is one of several in the poem that has inspired the popular theory that this woman, whose name we don't know yet, is actually a vampire. A vampire is, particularly in horror stories, a dead person who comes out at night and drinks the blood of living people. Back then, vampires didn't sparkle, but they were terribly pale and were often found in strange places, like behind trees in the middle of a cold night. It is not clear whether Coleridge means literal or figurative gems in line 65. Since the woman is out at night and appears to be very cold, the gems could simply be frost or maybe dew stuck in her hair. However, line 67 leads us to believe that these might be literal gems. The Victorians loved their bling. Bling is a slang word for precious stones like diamonds. Women's hairstyles, especially for the upper classes, were usually complicated and heavily adorned, meaning decorated. In the last stanza, we found hints that this mysterious woman might be a vampire. But in stanza 9, we uncover something even saucier: potential lesbianism. A lesbian is a homosexual woman. The word lesbian is also used for women in relation to their sexual identity or sexual behavior, regardless of sexual orientation, or as an adjective to characterize or associate nouns with female homosexuality or same sex attraction. Some scholars believe that Coleridge's intention for this poem was to illustrate a woman struggling with her feelings for another woman. And this stanza is where this idea bubbles to the surface. The speaker has just finished talking about how beautiful this woman is. And suddenly Christabel, and Coleridge makes very sure we know it is Christabel who's talking, is praying for salvation. In other words, she's praying to God to save her. सैल्वेशन को हिंदी में मोक्ष कहते हैं. वो मोक्ष प्राप्ति की कामना करती है भगवान से. What else would Christabel need saving from, if not from thoughts believed to be sinful and inappropriate at the time? Finally, in line 70, Christabel asks the woman what we have all been wondering, and that is, who are you? The next line is a long and fancy way to say simply that the woman answered Christabel's question. The lady tells Christabel that she is so tired that she can barely speak and asks her to help her up from the ground. She also tells Christabel not to be afraid, but we are not sure how convincing her pleas are. And considering the whole hanging out behind a tree at midnight and looking like a vampire thing she has going on. Before Christabel commits to helping her up, she wants to know how the lady got there, which is a pretty justified question in our opinion. Once again, we are reminded that the lady's voice is soft and pleasant sounding as she starts to answer Christabel's question. The stanza break before we actually get to that answer operates as a dramatic pause, kind of like when a TV show breaks for a commercial right before something major happens. Finally, we know this woman's name, Geraldine. A modern reader might feel like the name breaks the rhyme, but the last part of the name pronounced at the time like dine as in to eat, not Dean, as in Paula. So Coleridge's rhyming skills remain intact here. In other words, you have to pronounce the name Geraldine. In line 79, the word sire means father. In case you are curious, Dam would be the name for the mother. Geraldine launches into a description of her ordeal. It is a pretty melodramatic story, but it leaves a lot of details out. In other words, she's not very clear. She doesn't explain herself clearly. She expects Christabel to just accept that she is a noble's daughter without any name dropping, which seems a bit odd, really. If we were of noble blood, we would be dropping names all over the place. In other words, Geraldine should have told Christabel her full name, including who her father was. Geraldine's story leaves a lot of unanswered questions, which is a bummer because most will stay unanswered thanks to Coleridge never finishing the poem. Geraldine's vague story makes us feel like the details we are given about the situation may be important. Specifically, the number of men and the color of the horses may give us some clues about what is going on. The number 5 is thought to be symbolic of God's grace, and it often appears in important places in several different religious traditions. 5 men on white horses. That is what she means by palfrey. Really just screams, "We are the good guys" to us. This does not help our suspicions that Geraldine is a bad guy or woman at all. Speaking of white horses, according to legend, a white horse will not walk over the grave of a vampire. Perhaps these men were out specifically hunting for vampires, and their white horses allowed them to find Geraldine as she snuggled back into her coffin for a rest yesterday morning. She also says that she is not sure how long they rode because she was entranced, which could simply indicate that she was in whatever state vampires are in during the daytime. This means to believe or suppose, which is in line 92. In fact, this whole section makes us suspicious of Geraldine's honesty about her situation. Why would a group of men kidnap her and then just leave her beneath a tree once it got dark, telling her that they will come back, that they will be back? If she were a normal maid like she claims, this would be all be quite odd, wouldn't it? Why wouldn't she just get up and leave? All our alarm bells are going crazy over here. One more nail in the vampire coffin is that oak tree. As we discovered in line 33 back in stanza 4, the oak has some pretty heavy symbolism attached to it. It starts out that, in addition to it being sacred, oak is the preferred wood for making stakes for driving through a vampire's heart to kill it a second, more permanent time. Geraldine ends by telling Christabel that she does not know where these men went, but they will be back soon, so she needs Christabel's help to escape them. We still think this whole situation is pretty darned suspicious though. Geraldine seems to be getting a little pushy. She asks for a second time for Christabel to reach out her hand. As a vampire or a witch, Geraldine would need a clear invitation to enter Christabel's home. It does not have to be written with fancy script or anything. Christabel's outstretched hand will do just fine. Christabel falls for, she sympathizes with Geraldine's story. She reaches out her hand to help the strange woman up. While she helps Geraldine stand, she starts talking up her dad and his knights like some kind of propaganda machine. She tells the strange lady that her dad, Sir Leoline, is brave and chivalrous, and that Geraldine can now count him and his knights among her friends. She insists that they will get her back home safe and sound. Part 1, stanzas 13 to 18. You can take a look at the text. We will go directly to the meaning of these stanzas. Geraldine is on her feet now, and though Christabel would like to hurry, Geraldine is a bit of a literal drag. In other words, she is moving around very slowly. Christabel then tells Geraldine basically everything that a creature of the night intent on taking advantage of a young lady wants to hear. Everyone else in the castle is asleep. Even if she wanted to wake up her dad, he is sick and would not really appreciate being woken up anyway. Christabel insists that they tiptoe about the castle. In other words, they walk around silently without making any sound. Girls sharing a bed isn't super unusual, especially in Victorian times. But line 122 could be more evidence of the poem, suggesting that Christabel is open to being seduced by another woman, especially since she is insisting that they share a bed without anyone else in the castle knowing about it. Christabel lives in a classic castle complete with a moat. A moat is a long, wide channel that is dug around a castle. Castle is Mahal ya Kila, and filled with water to make it difficult for enemies to attack. Traditionally, castles have regular sized doors set in bigger doors that swung open large enough to let several men on horseback out at one time. When one or a few people wanted to enter the castle on foot, they just opened up the little door to avoid the effort and fanfare of the big doors. इसका नमूना हमारे राजस्थान में भी देखने को मिलता है, जो पुरानी बड़ी हवेलियाँ होती हैं जिनके बड़े बड़े द्वार होते हैं. तो द्वार तो लकड़ी के भारी और बहुत बड़े होते हैं, लेकिन पैदल आने जाने वालों के लिए एक छोटा दरवाज़ा होता है जिसको खोल के आप झुक कर अंदर प्रवेश कर सकते हैं. ऐसा ही एक दरवाज़ा क्रिस्टेबल के घर के एंट्रेंस पर भी था. Just when the two ladies are about to cross the threshold of the castle, Geraldine sinks down to the ground in extreme pain. There could be two different things going on here. Iron is another material that was traditionally used to ward off vampires. In fact, there have been several archaeological finds involving skeletons impaled on iron stakes or with iron stakes driven through their mouths to prevent the deceased, meaning the dead, from coming back as vampires. वैम्पायर्स को हम हिंदी में भूत पिशाच या चुड़ैल की तरह समझ सकते हैं. We modern folk may scoff at sparkling vampires, but way back in the old days, vampires were serious business. Coleridge makes it a point to tell us that the gate was laced with iron in line 126. So anyone who might be a vampire would probably have a hard time getting through. The second possibility is that the threshold represents a barrier for evil, and an evil creature of any sort cannot cross a threshold without an invitation. Threshold यानी कि द्वार जिससे किसी जगह प्रवेश किया जाता है. वो जो स्थान होता है उसे थ्रेशोल्ड कहते हैं. We already discussed that Christabel's outstretched hand in stanzas 10 and 11 made this invitation. But Geraldine may have needed a bit of a confirmation here with the iron enhanced doorway to the castle. Once on the other side of the gate, Geraldine feels much better and is able to walk along as if nothing happened. This stanza has a sing-song quality about it. We can almost see Christabel skipping along, swinging her arms and praising the Virgin Mary for the fortuitous rescue of Geraldine. Fortuitous means happening by chance rather than intention. Check out form and meter for more on how this poem is put together. Geraldine, on the other hand, waves Christabel's Christian comments away and claims that she is too tired to even speak. A vampire or a witch wouldn't be particularly inclined to praise any Christian god or saint, and being tired is a good way to avoid any awkward moment. Christabel still doesn't register anything strange about this woman. She just continues on in her obliviousness. Obliviousness means not being aware of anything. Coleridge is plainly toying with us in this stanza, like an overly dramatic children's show host asking whoever it could possibly be at the front door, when we have already seen the chipper neighbor lady on her way over. There is that old toothless dog again, doing a whole lot of nothing really except giving us the creeps. Christabel has never witnessed this dog being cruel or aggressive. But now, as the two women pass by the kennel is that wooden structure that is built where dogs can sleep. The dog growls a warning. The speaker implies that Christabel thinks that it could be that two-wit, two-hooing owl again, but she's just not sure what could be bothering the dog. Obviously, Christabel is not seeing the signs that trouble is right beside her in the form of Geraldine. Christabel and Geraldine are tiptoeing through the castle. The logs that were on the fire have all been spent and sit in a pile of their own ashes. This would be a cute, innocent Victorian scene of two ladies if it were not for the sudden, rather spooky flare up of the fire when Geraldine passes by the ashes. मतलब अंगीठी में जो लकड़ी बुझ चुकी थी, जिसका राख बन चुका था, वो जैसे ही जेराल्डिन वहाँ से गुज़रती है एकदम से आग पकड़ लेती है और आग की लपटें बाहर की तरफ आती हैं. The only thing that Christabel sees is Geraldine's eyes. This suggests that Geraldine might be giving her the evil eye, or at least hypnotizing her in some way. This is kind of comforting because we are starting to think that Christabel is a bit daft. Daft means foolish, as if वो बेवकूफ़ सी है. Instead, it seems that she is under some kind of spell. असल में क्रिस्टेबल मूर्ख या बुद्धू नहीं है, उसके ऊपर तो कोई सी प्रकार के जादू का प्रभाव है जो कि शायद जेराल्डी ने उस पर किया है. That is comforting as far as Christabel's IQ goes, but terrifying as far as the potential outcome of this story. Christabel catches a glance of her father's shield. The boss is the center, raised section of a shield. Most of them were just plain rounded sections, but more important warriors, such as a knight like Sir Leoline, could have highly decorative bosses that helped identify them in battle. She remembers that her dad is not a good sleeper. Maybe memories of traumatic battles keep him tossing and turning at night. Christabel does not want anyone else to know about the woman she is ferrying to her room at night. This is another place where some scholars point out the potential hints of lesbianism in the poem. They pass by Christabel's father's room, but it is so still that he must be fast asleep. Finally, they arrive at Christabel's room. It has rushes on the floor, which is a sweet smelling grass thrown on the dirt floors of castles and medieval homes for insulation and to dampen the sounds in the big open rooms. It is dark, but they can see anyway because they have been moving through the dark castle and have adjusted to the low light. Christabel's room is decorated with carvings that an artist felt appropriate for a lady's room, including a lamp hanging from silver chains attached to the feet of a carving of an angel. We will stop here and continue with the next section in the next session. Thank you.